Welcome into another edition of the Charm City Birdwatch podcast. I'm your host, Jake McDonnell. For all things Ravens and Orioles related on Charm City Birdwatch, follow us on Twitter at CharmCityBW, CharmCityBirdwatch.com, and you are listening to this through either iTunes or SoundCloud. We have a lot to dive into. The Ravens picking up a 23-16 win over the Indianapolis Colts 2 days before Christmas to not necessarily clinch a playoff spot, because there's no way they could do that this weekend. But the situation now is they just have to win and they get in. So we'll dive into all of that. They could still grab the 5 seed. Right now they're in the 6 seed, but depending on what happens tomorrow, we'll just determine what the Ravens situation is exactly next weekend, whether or not they're playing for a 6 seed, a 5 seed, or one or the other. So talking about that, we'll get into the Ravens team letter that they sent to their fans this week. I haven't actually gotten a chance to talk about this on the podcast yet, but they cited the London protests as a possible reason for no shows. And we also have looking ahead to the Bengals and then some Orioles talk as well. But the nice thing about particularly the London protests and the reason why the Ravens sent out the letter to season ticket holders is because the guy I'm having on is not only a writer and a reporter for Charm City Birdwatch, a contributor, but he is also a season ticket holder who was down at the game today. He is Nolan McGraw. You could follow him on Twitter at Nolan_MCG, me on Twitter at JMcDonald95. But again, Nolan, one of our insiders at Charm City Birdwatch, who jumped on the Zach Britton story the other day. But first, we got to dissect the Ravens game. Before we talk about anything else, Nolan, you were there. How bad was sitting in the rain? And then second part of that, how full was the stadium, and as well as how bad was dealing with the weather while you were there?
I guess I'll start with the empty seats. There was, coming into the stadium, it was a little bit different than it usually is. I think there was a backup on the highway somewhere. The way we came in through 83, it wasn't bad, but I heard there was a backup somewhere else. And at the main gate, you could see that there was a longer lines to get in about 10, 15 minutes before kickoff. So there was more people outside, but even when it did, everyone got filed in and into their seat. It was still about as empty as it's been the past couple home games. And then the rain drove people away, obviously. But overall, it was about the same as it's been the past couple home games. Would have been nice to have a bigger crowd there at the end, but it really started coming down in the second half. So, Saturday before Christmas, people aren't going to stick around for that.
Yeah, I thought that the turnout, if it would have been tomorrow, like a Christmas Eve game, I think if it was scheduled then, the attendance wouldn't have been nearly as high. I was actually expecting a bigger turnout today, but I think once it started raining and raining as much as it did, that really hurt numbers. And I think from what I saw on Twitter, it sounded like it filled up a little bit after kickoff happened and people that were backed up on the highway got in. We'll get back into the ticket and the empty seat issue in a little bit. We got the game to talk to. Again, the Ravens picking up a 23-16 win over the Colts, closer than you would expect, but the Ravens advanced to 9-6 and they're still in the thick of the wild card race. The Indianapolis Colts fall to 3-12, and all signs are pointing to Pagano being out of there after the season and what they're going to do with Jacoby Brissett. With Andrew Luck's return, how that's going to go. I'd imagine Brissett's going to get some sort of deal after the season, unless the Colts keep him around, just insurance in case Luck is gone again, has issues with that shoulder. But they were limited in the run game again. Alex Collins, 51 yards on 18 carries. Javoris Allen, Buck Allen had 37 yards on 8 carries. And worth noting, Collins rushed for just 19 yards against Cleveland last week, so he's limited again. Shaky performance by the defense, several dropped interceptions, no turnovers by either offense, so no defense recording either on either side a turnover, but some big performances from the Colts on the offensive side. T.Y. Hilton caught 6 passes for 100 yards, and 75-year-old Frank Gore rushed for 68 yards on 17 carries. The Ravens dominated in time of possession, 35-48 to 24-12. Only 7 total penalties in the game, but nevertheless, very sloppy. We expected them to play better. I thought at first it was going to be a blowout, and then once I noticed as much rain as we were getting, I kind of thought about it and was like, maybe this is going to be a little bit closer than most people realize, and that's exactly what happens. But they did get the win. How are you feeling home after they picked up their 9th win of the season and now have their first season, which will be finishing with a winning record in 3 years?
Well, the win, that's all that matters. What's the saying? It wasn't pretty, but It was Ravens football, and this felt like some classic Ravens football. We haven't seen it much. We haven't seen many close games this year, wins or losses. So this was an unexpected close game, but they pulled it out, and that's all that matters. I mean, just to reiterate what you said, the defense was disappointing, I think, mostly from a discipline standpoint and the dropped potential interceptions. You had 3 offsides calls, and 2 of them were where you were lined up in the neutral zone. You can't do that. You know, if you're going to jump offsides, that's one thing, but if you're offsides before the ball's even, you know, when the ball's put down, you know, that's just completely unacceptable. And to have one of them be Terrell Suggs is even worse. But it didn't end up being a reason for a loss, so that's good. But, you know, if they would have pulled in one of those, Weddle or Mosley would have pulled in one of their interceptions, it would have ended the game earlier too. But you know what? They pulled it out. I keep saying it, but I got to keep saying it because that's all that matters.
Now, do you attribute the shaky performance to the rain or the holidays? On a short week, they kind of took the Colts lightly, or is it more weather-related? Because I know with as much raining we would get, the field was certainly sloppy, very hard to see with some of the camera angles. Do you think there's a reason why that the defense didn't perform as well as we thought? The offense actually played decently, or do you think it's more anything can happen in the NFL on any given, I guess in this instance, a Saturday?
Yeah, I think it's more of what you just said. You know, you can't take any opponent lightly. Brissett looked pretty darn good today, at least from my view. I thought he played a pretty good game. He had sailed a couple passes, and once he started getting pressure on him, he was making some more questionable decisions. But, you know, any given week, you got to show up, and you know, if there was another reason, maybe you could cite the rain for those interception drops, but I think it was just a lack of discipline. We've seen Weddle drop interceptions that have hit him in the chest before. Can't do anything about it now.
Well, judging, especially, you know, with the recent criticism of Harbaugh, and especially this season, a lot of people have deemed him on the quote-unquote hot seat. I've trying to pay a little bit of attention during games to coaching decisions. Kind of a mild game, but there were some, you know, like every Ravens game, there were a couple moments to make you scratch your head or yell at the TV or in your seat or wherever you may be. Weird play in the third quarter. They had 3 offensive linemen stay there, and then they had like Ronnie Stanley and Austin Howard like both lined up like looking like they were going out to catch a pass. And then Flacco throws a little screen pass over to Nick Boyle, which results in a 3-yard loss. Didn't understand that play call at all. Not only did the formation look silly, but the whole idea of just throwing a screen and Ben Watson missed the block. It was just a very bad play. And then burning timeouts on the Colts last drive, I didn't really understand. I know that there was a chance that the Colts were going to score and go for 2 and give the Ravens the ball back, and you're trying to save as much time on the clock as possible. But at the same time, you're giving the Ravens offense no timeouts to work with, and we've seen several instances in recent history where they just look completely slow and just no urgency at all in particularly urgent situations. I didn't really understand burning the timeouts there. I could understand the argument though that if they were going to score, you want to have your offense, you know, have some time. But in that heat of the moment, I don't know if I would have been burning timeouts there. But with the possible playoff seeding on the line, I get why they did that.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned both of them because they were 2 of the big takeaways I had from this game. I thought it was both of those cases were extremely questionable, and I disagree with both of them. To start with the strange offensive play call, it was in the red zone as well. I believe we had either a 7, maybe even a 10-point lead at that point. You know, you've got a chance to get a touchdown and maybe put the game away, probably put the game away. And again, it's 3rd and short. There's no need to run something fancy. Just run a smart play call. I mean, I have no idea how many times I've said that this year, where they end up running some stupid play call, an unnecessary play call on 3rd and short or 4th and short, and you just shoot yourself in the foot. And this one was one of the worst I've seen all year, and it just screams more how upset Harbaugh still is about that playoff game against the Patriots, where they ran those crazy, plays where their linemen were lined up as receivers and they beat us with it. It worked against us, and Harbaugh kept, complaining about that after the game and went to the league and, complained to them about it. And now you see him, the Ravens running it under him. I don't understand it at all. It was just really, really tough to watch that. And then to go to the timeouts at the end, that was another thing because it was not it wasn't like 3rd and 4th and goal for Indianapolis. They had, a 5-yard window there between a first down and the end zone. So had it been a 3rd and goal and a 4th and goal situation, I would have been fine with the timeouts because then, they have to get a touchdown or it's a turnover on downs. But if they still had the ability to get a first down, there's no reason for you to take the timeouts because then they can just get that first down and then they control the clock from there. But I do understand, obviously, if they score, you want to have enough time to go down the field and get a field goal. But it just seemed very strange to me with over a minute 30 even, I think, left on the clock.
We are talking Ravens and their 23-16 win over the Indianapolis Colts on the Charm City Birdwatch podcast. I'm your host, Jake McDonnell, joined by Nolan McGraw, contributor for Charm City Birdwatch and reporter as well. You can follow him on Twitter at Nolan_MCG. I am Jay McDonnell95, and of course, Charm City BW is where you can find our site's Twitter handle. And of course, we are coming to you through either iTunes or SoundCloud. A couple days, or actually yesterday, rather, the Ravens sent out a letter written by Dick Cass, team president, to season ticket holders addressing the empty seats that have plagued M&T Bank Stadium all season long. And really, the Orioles have struggled with this as well recently, even when they've been in contention. But this is not just a issue Baltimore and the Ravens are facing. This is a league-wide around the NFL problem with empty seats, except for the franchises like the Vikings, the Eagles, the Seahawks. Teams like those attendance figures haven't changed really drastically. But again, even teams like the Jaguars, who are going to be hosting their first playoff game, their first playoff appearance, quite frankly, in over 10 years, and they can't fill up their stadium. But again, the Ravens sent out a letter to their fans. The full letter is available online, not only on the Ravens website. If you just do a quick Google search, you could find it. But some of the quotes that Dick Cass said in the anthem: "We had the poor showing in London, complicated by the kneeling of a dozen players during the national anthem. That became an emotional and divisive issue. We know that hurt some of you. Others saw it differently and welcomed the dialogue that followed. Others bluntly told us to keep statements and protests out of the game. There are some of you who have stayed away from our games." Cass goes on to say, "We have had significant numbers of no-shows in the past when our play on the field has not met the high standard we have set for the Ravens. But this year has been different. The numbers are higher, and it is noticeable. There are a number of reasons for no-shows, but surely the one-time protest in London has been a factor." There's nothing really about this letter Cass said that we didn't already know. The part that I struggle, or I'm having a hard time, understanding and coming to terms with in the matter that they sent this, is they're really highlighting the London protest as the biggest reason of why people aren't showing up, and that's not. I don't believe that's it at all. I believe the fact that since they've won Super Bowl 47, aside from C.J. Mosley, unless I'm forgetting anybody, none of their draft picks have made the Pro Bowl. And again, I could be forgetting somebody. They've never drafted a Pro Bowl wide receiver. The injuries have hurt the team this year. There's no disputing that, but they don't have a game-changing wide receiver. They don't have a big-name running back. Ray Lewis and Ed Reed, they lost 2 Hall of Famers. But I think the fact of the matter is, there's several ties go into this. The protests are certainly a small sample of the Ravens fans that aren't showing up. I do believe there are people that aren't showing up because of that, but you've got, NFL Sunday Ticket at home where you can be much more comfy and don't have to sit out in the cold. People, save money by not going to games. You don't have to pay for food, and parking prices are ridiculous. We've seen what the Falcons have done this season in the new stadium, reduce prices for concessions. You have the rules around the NFL that a lot of people were struggling with, like we saw last week in Pittsburgh, and quality of play around the NFL is down. And while that still may be true, I think the Ravens aren't taking enough accountability. Like they did mention in the where it says here, we have had significant numbers of no-shows in the past when our play has not met the high standard we and you have set for the Ravens. They're taking some account as well, but they're also saying that maybe some of the fans' expectations may be a little bit too high. But really, the play on the field has not been the same, with the exception of 2014 since they won the Super Bowl. It's just not been the same. And, the Flacco contract, a lot of people are unhappy with because he hasn't played up to it. The lack of playmakers certainly hurts. And again, when you have all this happen, the quality of play, when you don't, when you have all that and you don't draft any Pro Bowlers and you can't develop a receiver, people are going to lose interest. And I think that's the biggest reason why people aren't showing up. Anyway, I kind of ramble on a lot. Do you agree with the quality of play or the product on the field being the biggest reason for the no-shows, or are you seeing something different?
I'd have to disagree a little bit. At this point, for me, it's my impression that the London protest is the major factor. When the protest happened, I didn't have a problem with it. I'm not one of the people that would say we need to boycott the NFL. But after weeks and weeks and weeks have passed since then, I think for me, it's clear that that is the leading reason for no-shows. But I am not dismissing all the other stuff that you said. Obviously, how many starting quarterbacks around the league have been injured? If you want to look just at the Ravens, like you said, in terms of playmakers, the offense is just, there's no real playmakers, no real exciting players to watch. But to counter that, I would cite the mid-2000s. The mid-2000s, you had a dominant defense like we have this year, a fun defense to watch like we have this year, with playmakers and a ton of turnovers and sacks and exciting defensive play. And the offense was just meh. It was just there. You had Kyle Bowler running the show, and we know how much of a mess that was. So the offense this year, say what you will how they started, but they've clearly improved. And even in their worst parts of the season, I would say they're better and more exciting to watch than those Kyle Bowler years. So I don't think that can be cited as too big of a reason. And, the weeks and weeks have passed since the protest, and nothing else has happened. The players haven't kneeled or anything since the London game and then the prayer before the Steelers game the following week. But nothing since then has happened. But I think if it wasn't because of the protest, you would see a slight increase in the following weeks coming back, and it's just kind of plateaued. It's dipped down and it's plateaued, or it's gotten less and less. There's no real sign that it's going to get better. Next week will be definitely interesting to see. Because obviously, after winning today, you just got to win one more and you're in. If the weather's nice, barring something like that, it'll be interesting to see if there's a better turnout next week than the past couple home games. But I'm not going to get my hopes up. But I would definitely like to see more people there. I don't know how much of an effect this letter has had. Probably not a whole lot, but I thought it was a nice letter to send out. It was a little bit more than the basic PR stuff you usually see. But like Jake said, if you want to read it, it's online. Go ahead and read the whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And with you would expect the season's on the line. I'm sure there are scenarios where if the Ravens lost next week, they could still get in the playoffs, but a lot would have to happen. But basically they need to win and get in. It is a quote-unquote playoff game. But with that being said, it is on New Year's Eve. It is a 1 o'clock game, which is promising, but it will definitely, with the playoff atmosphere, will be interesting to see what will happen, especially when you consider that it's probably going to be the last time, unless, the Ravens make the 5 seed and some other team finishes in the 6 seed. Both those teams go to the AFC Championship. Unless that scenario plays out, this is definitely going to be the last time we watch the Ravens play in Baltimore in 2017. Moving on now on the Charm City Birdwatch podcast, going over the Ravens' 23-16 win over the Colts on Sunday. 237 pass yards on 19 completions and 2 touchdowns for Mr. Flacco. Sacks for the young guys, Matt Judon and Willie Henry. Mike Wallace leading the Ravens with 4 receptions and 60 yards. And, of course, Michael Campanaro and Max Williams catching their first touchdown passes of the season. Looking ahead now to that Bengals game, which takes place next Sunday. The Ravens gaining an extra day. New Year's Eve against Cincinnati Bengals at 1 o'clock. Bengals getting ready to play the Lions tomorrow. Like we said, when they're in. But one thing we should keep in mind is the Ravens are 3-7 in their last 10 games against the Bengals. And this is likely Marvin Lewis's last game. It's definitely his last game from what we understand coaching the Bengals, but it may be his last game if he doesn't want to coach anymore. It might be his last game ever. No one knows except for Marvin Lewis whether or not he wants to keep coaching, but the Bengals are certainly looking to play spoiler, and they're going to be playing very hard for their head coach that will be leaving Cincinnati after 15 years and failing to win a single playoff game. Does any of what I said make you nervous, or are you confident heading into next week against Cincinnati?
All of that makes me nervous, especially, you're facing a division opponent, a rival, if you want to call it that even, but at the very least it's a division opponent. It's a familiar opponent, and, the playoff spot hasn't been secured yet. There's been times in the past where we've seen the Ravens go into the final week and they're able to rest their starters or pull them out after, the first half. But, there's still one more win that you got to get. And honestly, the Bengals aren't having the best year, but you'd rather not play a division opponent in this scenario, I would say. But I think they will get it done. I think they'll get the win, but there's definitely, I think, more to be worried about next week than there was going into this week. And we saw how this turned out. It was it came down to the last possession. So definitely stuff to be concerned about, but I trust Harbaugh and I trust the coaching staff to have everybody ready.
Well, of course, the holidays are rolling around. Of course, Christmas Eve and Christmas coming up, as well as New Year's. We certainly wish all of you listening out there have a wonderful time, wonderful holiday with your friends and family celebrating Christmas and the holiday season. One part of the holidays approaching is the winter meetings from Major League Baseball occurring almost 2 weeks ago now, and lots of Orioles rumors heading out of the winter meetings. We've heard all week stories about Manny Machado and possibly trading some teams that were interested. The Orioles apparently received between 8 to 10 trade offers for Manny Machado. But nonetheless, those talks have been traded down and the Orioles are standing pat for now. And then you couple in the Zach Britton injury, which occurred about midway through the week. And of course, you jumped on the story, so you've been all over that coverage. But many layers to this story. A ruptured Achilles. Apparently it's on his right leg, which is, of course, is his planting leg when he comes down for to pitch, being a lefty. This is big, not only for Zach Britton. He's a pending free agent after the 2018 season, has 1 year left on his contract with the Orioles, was nearly traded at the Major League Baseball trade deadline last year. The Astros were really trying to get a hand on him. He was looking at possibly getting dealt this year, and if not, getting a lucrative contract after the season. And not only that, but the guy who's likely taking his place, Brad Brock, also a free agent, coming up after the season, and he's now projected to be the closer, but you could also make cases for guys like Michael Givens or Miguel Castro to seize that role. But really a domino effect on Zach Britton and the Orioles with this injury, and now you're going to go at least the first half, probably up through all the All-Star break, without your All-Star closer, who's coming off an injury-riddled 2017 season. We haven't seen the same from Britton since his All-Star 2016 season. Along with all of this, you also have all the Manny Machado stuff behind closed doors. You got fans clamoring for a trade. Some fans are divided. A lot of people are saying that they don't want to trade. Where are you on everything? How are you feeling a couple days to sit back and take in the Zach Britton situation now that you've had some time to digest it. Again, the Orioles will be without him. Adam Wainwright had a very similar injury to his Achilles that he was able to come back from fairly recently, but there's a lot of Orioles stuff going on right now, and a lot of it isn't good. Where are you 2 weeks after the winter meetings, Machado and Britton news mainly, as we wait now a couple more weeks for pitchers and catchers to report?
I think the only way to describe it is disappointing. It's just been one long, hard to watch car crash, if you want to call it that. When the talks started heating up for Machado, I guess I naively got excited. I didn't think that they were even going to get to that point where talks were serious, so I got excited. I thought they might actually do something and get a return for, the caliber player that Machado is, get a proper return before, instead of just a compensatory pick, because you're obviously not going to be able to re-sign him. But, then the Britton stuff happened, and then, maybe a day later, the Machado stuff fizzled out. And I think for me, at least, I'm not a GM. I'm not a guy in Major League Baseball trying to, make these deals happen. But I got to feel like the Orioles didn't have a lot of leverage with the Machado deal. Other teams know that there was no chance we were going to have of signing him after this year. They know that we need to get something in a trade, or we're just stuck with him for this year, and then that's that. So there's no real incentive for another team to give up, I think, the top-tier pitching that we would want. And then you saw that with Chicago. They had I forget the guy's name, but they have a real nice young pitching prospect, and, the talks were there, and then reports came out that they pulled him off the table. So then, obviously the Orioles didn't like that, and then, I believe there was another team that did something similar. They had pulled their top pitching prospect off the table as well. So I just think there is a lack of leverage. I think other teams looked at the Orioles and said, this is a desperate team. We're not going to give them our best deal or our best offer, and if they don't take it, they don't take it, but we're not going to give them more than we should, I guess is the right way to say it.
Very interesting, even though the Orioles have several expiring contracts after the 2018 season to guys like Britton and Machado, Brock, and Adam Jones, then you also couple in the contracts of Duquette and Showalter running out as well. Very interesting season, very interesting year for the entire Orioles franchise coming up. And despite everything facing them right now, they still planned on contending in 2018, which leads you to wonder, if they plan on contending, what are they going to, is Peter Angelos really going to be willing to part ways with Machado? Certainly be monitoring all of this as we go forward. Again, want to wish you a happy holidays from the Charm City Birdwatch podcast. Again, Nolan McGraw, our contributor and reporter for our website, of course, Charm City BW for our website, Nolan_MCG finds him on Twitter. I am Jake McDonnell 95. And of course, this podcast coming to you crystal clear through iTunes or SoundCloud. So as the holidays go through, we will be keeping you up on all Ravens news and Orioles news as well. We'll get the preview up for the Bengals game midway through the week, as well as general Ravens and Orioles news whenever it's breaking. And of course, Nolan's been great with all the Terps coverage, the Terps hoops as well. So for Nolan, I will say good night and happy holidays. We'll see you next time on the Charm City Birdwatch podcast.